Hi, it's Stephen Decisive. This week on the Decisive Living podcast, we introduce an overview, the Decisive operating system, the system that you use to generate confidence, clarity, and creativity in your personal and professional life. In addition, we'll be introducing decisive answers you never knew existed. Your confidence, your clarity, and your creativity are the three most important skills that you can apply to the three most critical areas of your life: your health, your wealth, and your relationships. Whether you're starting up, whether you're starting out, or whether you're starting over, personally or professionally, unstoppable confidence, visionary clarity, and abundant creativity are the keys that you need to unlock decisive living. Hi there, how are you? Welcome to this pilot, if you will, the pilot of the Decisive Living podcast, which we're also producing and recording in video. So if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening to this on your preferred podcasting channel, I'm talking to just you. And my first lesson that I want to share is on that point. One of my most proudest compliments I get is people saying that when I speak to them, whether it's on a voice note, whether I speak and they hear from me on a live show and they're watching it, whether they're actually watching videos of mine, for years now, people have always said, Steve, it feels so personable. I feel as if you're speaking to me. So my number one lesson in this journey of us creating decisive living in your life, what is it that people are saying about what you do? That thing that's in your mind right now, from a positive perspective, and I'll come to opinions and compliments shortly. People tell me that the way I present on video, for whatever reason, is very personable. So when I'm actually doing video like this or doing a podcast like this, because I know I'm just naturally being me and I've been complimented because of that personable nature of how I do it, it gives me confidence. So what are people saying to you that you can draw on to create your confidence? We're trying to create decisiveness in your life. And one of the first parts of decisiveness is this concept of confidence. What are people saying about you that you could embrace? And when you're actually executing it, like with me speaking on this video or this podcast, I feel confident because I'm just doing what I've been doing for years now. And I know that people compliment me about it. What have you been doing for years that people are complimenting you about? And tap into that. It's the first step towards decisive confidence, which we'll come to a little bit later. The second thing that we're doing, and the second lesson I want to share with you, is everything we're doing in the structure of how we run this podcast is we're running it in cycles. So every 4 weeks, they're clustered together. 4 episodes are clustered together to be very specific. And as I go through this pilot episode to overview the Decisive OS, it'll become clear. But over the next 12 weeks, in 4-week blocks, we'll be looking at determined, discerning, and decisiveness in a very detailed way over the next 4 weeks. 4 weeks for determined, 4 weeks for discerning, 4 weeks for decisive, and really digging in deep. So what does that mean? Well, it's very real, it's very relevant, and it's very live. What do I mean by that? If you'd have said a few years ago, 2019, that the airline fleet of the world would have been closed down, children would have been staying at home, and the governments would be handing out money to business people to be staying at home, no one would have believed you. But it's very real that that's been happening in the last couple of years, and thankfully we're coming from that. So what we're doing is we're talking about very real things that are happening in your life personally and professionally right now. We're then applying that into the decisive operating system and the structure of how the system works. And that structure makes it very relevant. And we cross-check to make sure that we're being relevant in the advice and guidance we're giving you for you to be decisive in the way that you live your life. And then thirdly, we're going to be live. So it's going to be real, it's going to be relevant, and it's going to be live. And the live is very much on the basis of Q&A, the decisive answers. We'll be taking relevant, real, and live questions that are being asked and making those the very focal point of what we're doing in the context of the Decisive Living podcast. So my second lesson or my second tip for you to communicate, whether that's in an email, whether that's on a video, whether that's on a podcast, whether that's in a meeting, whether that's in front of a group, whether it's presenting one-to-one or one-to-many. There are 3 things you need to do, and you can write this down. Tell people what you're going to tell them. Tell them, and then tell them what you told them. The mother of skill is repetition. So when I speak about real things that are happening right now, I'm telling you what I'm going to talk about. I then actually tell you what it is, linking it back to the structure of the Decisive operating system, giving you tools inside the system of how you can apply those personally and professionally in your life. And then we go to a live Q&A where I take either live questions as the show and the podcast progresses, or we just take live questions that are trending online and we answer them. And by answering them, we tell you what we've told them. I'm going to talk to you about real things that are happening now, and I'm going to tell you that's what we're going to do. Then I'm going to tell you how that applies into the operating system called Decisive that you can use in your life. And then we're going to go and seek questions, which we'll do on this pilot episode. We'll then go and seek questions that will actually prove the data of what people are speaking about today, and then actually apply that into the operating system in a functional way to go, okay, this is real, this is relevant to me, and this is live right now. Decisiveness and decisive living is by being very focused on what's real, relevant, and live in your life right now. You're listening to the Decisive Living Podcast. The Decisive OS is broken up into 3 very clear zones. The determined zone, where our confidence is, the discerning zone, where our clarity is, and our decisive zone, which is where our creativity is. The determined zone is where our preconceived notions exist. The determined zone is where our values exist. The determined zone is where our conditioning of the way our culture, our conditions, and the circumstances of how we've been raised and where we live apply and create those preconceived notions, those accepted norms, those things that we hold accountable to ourselves and hold to be true. So I'll go back to a couple of the examples I gave a short while ago. We all had in 2019 a preconceived notion that it was impossible for every school child across the world to be staying at home because they couldn't go to school. Equally, we had a preconceived notion that it's impossible for all of the airlines to basically park up in deserts around the world and no one was flying. We also had a preconceived notion that it made no sense that the governments of the world would actually give out money, make it law that they had to stay at home. If you'd have said that to people in 2019, that you can't go out, you can't go to school, you can't run your business, and by the way, the government will give you money across the world to do it, we had a preconceived notion that that's not possible. The other preconceived notion we have is that when we receive opinions, and opinions are normally some type of feedback, some type of critique, we receive opinions and it's like a droplet of blue dye into a glass of clear water. It just completely stains the water almost instantly. But in the decisive living and the Decisive OS, in Decisiland, as some of you have heard me call it, a positive opinion is called a compliment. But the problem with a compliment is, unlike the droplet of opinion that drops into a clear glass of water and that blue droplet of dye just stains the entire glass, when we drop a green dye of a compliment into the same clear glass representing our life, it's almost as if the green droplet drops into the water and it doesn't stain anything. It almost stays isolated. Opinions are preconceived notions that we'll accept if they're negative. But if someone gives us a positive opinion, which we call a compliment, we find it difficult to accept. The very, very first thing in the determined zone is to establish a sense of confidence, and there's a number of ways you can actually do that.
Access the full episode for only $10 a month. Check out at stephendesady.com/podcast.
Next week, we'll go into the first level of how to build your confidence in the determined zone. And then in weeks through 2, 3, and 4, we'll finish off the determined zone of the OS with some really functional tools on how to build unstoppable confidence. If you want to become a decisive, the best way to do that is to follow on whichever platform, whether if you're listening to this as on a podcast, follow the podcast so we can send those and remind you when they're coming. They'll be out weekly. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. And obviously you can also reach out to me at stephendecisive.com. Your health, your wealth, and your relationships are the key things that drive every decision you make in your life. The health of your physical health, the health of your relationship with money and financial well-being, your health in relation to your relationships, the wealth of your relationships, the wealth of the abundance of your health. They're all interconnected, and they're basically the reason we do everything in life. We go out and seek jobs so we can secure wealth, which will enable us to build relationships, create families, and to have health and prosperity and be able to protect our health as we get older. We actually want to create a sense of wealth in our life to be able to do those things. We want to create relationships that are healthy and have got an abundant wealth of beauty and love and creativity in our lives. Every single thing you will ever do, everything will be based on the decisiveness, on the power of your relationships, the power of your health, the power of your wealth. And every single thing that I do is focused on creating a decisive operating system to give you visionary clarity, unstoppable confidence, and abundant creativity in every relationship, in every wealth decision, and every health decision you make in your life. I'll see you next week. Follow us on the podcast, subscribe on YouTube, reach out at stephendecisive.com. Until then, be well, be brilliant, be decisive.